matter to you, feel free to tune out what I'm saying. However, I say that with one warning. As seniors, you change. You're supposed to continue to change, evolve, develop, grow, all those great things. And so what you want sometimes changes. So I encourage you, if you're like, oh, I think I want this, but there's a small chance I might pursue this college and I should know this information, then tune in. So make sure that you are gathering the information you need for your journey is the bottom line. So I'm going to give you a lot of information, and then we'll have a break, and then it will be time for you to dig in and actually start your application. At that point, we're going to have 5 people here helping us. We're going to have Miss Brett and Miss Alm, but then we're also going to have an admissions rep from the U, River Falls, and NDSU. And based on your registration form, raise your hand. It was kind of stunning to me, actually. Raise your hand if you're planning to apply to one of those 3 schools, a U of M system school, NDSU, or River Falls. Yeah, almost everybody. So, and the thing is if you didn't raise your hand, that's okay too, because what happens in the world of admissions is that they work at a lot of different schools. And so they know the systems and they know how they work at different schools. So never be hesitant to ask any one of them for anything. So you'll have a lot of support today. That is true though. If I could give you one piece of advice during this time, it would be never be afraid to ask for help. From me, I am here. Like, stop in, use the QR code, make an appointment, whatever works for you. But also to admissions reps, because sometimes you need answers from them. So we're going to get right into it. And if you have any questions along the way, don't hesitate to raise your hand. There is a general rule, so I'm going to try to talk in generals today, generalities. However, you, as I said from the beginning, are unique. You have your own journey, and you might be like, nope, I am applying to this one school, and I know I am going to that one school, and it is end of story. That's your journey. Generally speaking, you want to apply to 4 to 6 schools. Also, very generally speaking, you're mixing it up. You have a couple of reach. Do you know what that means? Those are schools that you're not certain to get into at all. And these days, I know a lot of you have Madison on your list. I hate to say it. No matter what your GPA is and no matter what your ACT is, Madison is not a certainty for anyone right now. That's just how it is. So that would be a reach school. And then you have your target schools where you are right in that zone. They will publish the middle 50% high school GPA they accept, the middle 50% ACT they accept. If you're right in there, those are your target schools. And then you have safety schools that are just like, you know, any 2-year community college is a safety school, because as long as you graduate with a high school diploma, you are accepted to a 2-year school. So there's mix, but those terms mean different things to each of you. Some of you aren't going to be applying to any 2-year schools, and that's fine. I also suggest a mix of private and public, because at the end of the day, you have no idea what the school is actually going to cost you until you have applied, been accepted, and gotten an award letter. And it happens every year that I have many students who it's actually cheaper for them to go to a private school than it is a public school. Welcome, you guys can grab your transcripts up here. So keep that in mind. I have a video linked here about fit, really thinking about what the right school is for you. I can't encourage you enough to do that. All the time, I also have students who will say, I want to go to the U. And I'll say, great, tell me why you want to go to the U. I have no idea. Seems like a good school. I'm like, okay. And then we go through like, are you aware that you might be in class with 1,000 people? No. Are you aware that you might have to commute 45 minutes to class? No. Like the U is a great fit for so many students, but it's not a great fit for you just because it happens to be our flagship institution here. How many of you have started to look at the cost of college? Raise your hand if you've been looking. Yay, I'm so proud of you. That's great. Every school website is required by law to have what's called a net price calculator. So you can Google the school's name, plus the words net price calculator. You fill out some information and it gives you an estimate of what it might cost your family, okay? If anyone is planning to apply ED, early decision in here, you have to do this as your very first step, and I'll talk more about ED in a second. Out-of-state tuition. It is so alluring to want to go to Colorado, California, Florida. These are very, very popular states. The Carolinas, students all the time want to go to these states. And if that is in your and your family's budget, go for it. The truth of the matter is, those states that I just named, tuition is 3 and 4 times for us as it is for their in-state students. So you have to keep that in mind. So, and they're not going to be providing a lot in the way of scholarships and aid, generally speaking. So just keep that in mind. Here are, I'll just show you where you can, if you're still searching for what colleges might be right for you, this links you to my page on our high school page where there are just, of course, Xello is, the preferred first resource, but then you have other resources here that are really, really powerful. College Scorecard gives you everything from what you are expected to make by major, by school, to what the debt is per student at school. So it has some really powerful information so you can understand the value you're getting from different schools. Return on investment is another powerful tool. It will tell you by major and by school, again, what your return on investment would be based on earnings and debt ratio. Lots of great tools. Niche is kind of a great one for if you're looking for that best psychology programs in whatever, the US or in Minnesota, or best mechanical engineering programs. If you kind of like those best lists, that Niche has great resources there. So definitely use those. Okay. So many of you are applying to Madison or the U, so I want to just take a minute to explain this because this is confusing to students. If you are applying to one of these schools, I will say, what college are you applying to? And then you might look back at me and say, the U, I just told you that. And I'll say, yes, but which college? So what happens when you're applying to these two institutions is you have to indicate your first and second choice college because their programs, the U, you can see they actually have whatever that is, 8, 10 colleges umbrellaed under the University of Minnesota. So which college you apply to depends on which major you plan to pursue. And many of you might be thinking, well, this doesn't really matter, I'll just transfer. Even when the University of Minnesota rep is here, he will tell you to transfer should never be your plan. It should never be your game because it just isn't as easy as you might expect it to be. So if you want to be an engineer, you want to go for the College of Science and Engineering. You do not want to necessarily be in the College of Liberal Arts. If you are not accepted into the College of Science and Engineering and you're accepted into the College of Liberal Arts, you will have to really think about if that will be a good fit for you because getting to your eventual goal will be dependent upon transferring. And transferring is almost entirely dependent upon the grades you earn that first year. So these are just some things to definitely consider and think about. So if you don't know what college you would apply to, you just search for your major and you'll be able to see what college it exists within. Okay, who in here, raise your hand if you have a firm idea of what application you plan to use. Okay, who has started the Common App? Okay, so the Common App, pros and cons. Common App has 1,000 schools on it. So the idea is that you can easily apply to multiple schools using one application. And it varies. So if you select 5 schools on the Common App and one of them is Harvard and one of them is the U and one of them is Gustavus, it will prompt you for the essay prompts by the school because Harvard has more essay prompts than any of the other schools that I mentioned. So that part is great. the part that students generally really dislike about the Common App and why you have your transcript in front of you is you have to hand enter every class, credit, and grade you've ever taken or will take. I'm a little bit ambivalent on this point. At the end of the day, I think if I'm really push comes to shove, I kind of think it's almost easier to use each college's application because the Common App is trying to be a lot of different things at once, and for some students that can be frustrating because it's not always intuitive. So you just have to think of the trade-offs. For other students, they are like, I love that it's all in one place. That works for me. That's my jam. That's great. So you just have to think of what's right for you. Then there are system-wide apps. So like if you're going to apply to Mankato and Winona and St. Cloud, you're going to use the Minnesota State app. And if you're going to apply to Madison and La Crosse and Eau Claire, you can apply using the UW system app. And then I really want to make note, because many of you indicated U of M and UMD. So a really great feature if you use the Go for Goldie app, that's the University of Minnesota Twin Cities app. If you use that app and you want to apply to other U of M system schools, you can select Share My App and you can apply to those schools for free. So it's kind of a nice feature because applications for some of these schools are never free unless you need it to be free. So there are always waivers available. So if you cannot afford an application and you are on education benefits, free and reduced lunch, you for sure can get a waiver if you have outstanding circumstances that have occurred, meaning that you can no longer afford applications. Come talk to me and we'll figure out how to get you a waiver, okay? So don't let the fee be a barrier for you, but it does depend by school. And then, as I mentioned, you can just search the college name and the application and get there. So, deadlines. How many in here plan to get all of their apps in by November 1st? Okay, my goal is to make sure all of you raise your hand by the end of the day because I want to convince you why that is such a great idea. A few different reasons. Early action means you apply early, it's not binding, but you get all the perks, which means you find out early. Every year, I have a handful of students starting their senior year in September, and they already know they've been accepted to the U. They already have that in their pocket. Now, imagine having that information in your pocket versus my students who apply December 31st at 11:59. They don't find out the U's decision until March 30th. And then you are supposed to turn around and have a decision by May 1st. You have a month. So the earlier you apply, the earlier you know the answer, which is awesome for so many reasons. You feel a little lighter, you've got your apps in, you can enjoy your senior year. Generally speaking, acceptance rates are higher. My own daughter applied early to La Crosse, got in. She had a friend who decided he really wanted to go to La Crosse in April. He had a 3.75 and he was rejected. That's pretty high for La Crosse. So if he had just applied early, or even by January 1st, he would have been much better. But these are like, these timelines make a big difference. Some people will tell you who have access to more scholarship dollars. Others will say, no, we always reserve our scholarship dollars. But then others will say, well, they have a bucket and they just keep doling it out as their applicants come in. And if you apply late, you're just gonna have the bottom of the bucket. So you can infer what you want from that. Early decision. I'm not gonna spend a lot of time on this because I don't think there are a ton of you applying early decision, but what you need to know about early decision. If you are applying to a very selective institution, early decision is a tool you can use. However, it is a tool that comes with some pretty big strings. So the pro on early decision is that acceptance rates are higher. You cannot deny it. If you wanted to go to Northwestern in Chicago, acceptance rates early decision are 15%. Regular decision, they're hovering around 5 right now. So 3 times higher. However, it's a binding decision. So that means that if they say you're in, you have to go. So your family has to be okay with the 90 grand price tag. It's binding. You are expected to be there. That's why that net price calculator I mentioned before is so important. You have to have, your family has to have their finances pinned down, and they have to be able to sign and say, yep, that's not a problem. Regular decision is January 1st typically. These are all typical. Some schools will have an early action that's November 15th. So these are all just like generalities. And then again, last year was unique. Decision day, you maybe had friends who graduated last year. They kept moving the decision day because of the FAFSA fiasco. We expect it to return to a May 1st decision day this year. That being said, and this is more to carry home to your parents, the FAFSA is not, last year everyone thought this year your class would have it made, the FAFSA would be totally no problem, everything would be good. It's not exactly turning out to be the case. They still do not know when they are going to open it. They promised it would be open by October 1st for your class. That's when it is supposed to open. It is up in the air right now. So you're going to want to pay attention to the information I send you about the FAFSA. It's real important. Okay, you might be like, oh, I'm already overwhelmed. It's a lot of information. Couple of tips that help people stay organized. If you do not have a personal email for all of this, create one today. Start using your personal email. It is where you should just have the home for all of your college, scholarships, financial aid, all of your information should exist in your personal email. Stay on top of those emails. I have so many different sob stories I can share, but one year I had a student who really wanted to go to the U. And you have to, when you apply to the U, it's a unique institution and they don't want your transcript. They won't accept it. You have to, if you're using the Common App, you end up entering all of your courses and grades and credits twice, generally speaking. Well, this student did it in the Common App, and then he didn't pay attention to the emails where they kept saying, you need to fill out your courses and grades in the application tracker. You need to fill out your courses and grades. You need to fill out your courses and grades. They called him. They texted him. He didn't get accepted because he never filled out his courses and grades. And mom was irate. It was not a good situation. But in the U, when I called, they could tell me. They're like, we sent him 22 emails on these dates. We called him on these dates. We texted on these dates. Now, note, Madison, they will not call and they will not email. They might email a couple of times, but very same thing happened with another student, Madison. They're like, we emailed twice. No calls, no texts. You have to stay on top of it. So just make sure that you're checking that. There's also application trackers that schools use. Use those. There's a college planning tool in Zello. Use that. These are good ways to just kind of help you keep track of the information that you need. Deadlines, what else they need from you, because they all have their own way of doing things, unfortunately. Okay, free apps. There are so many free apps out there. One thing to know right off the bat, when I said you should apply to private schools too to just see how much they cost you, there's no reason not to, because every single private school in Minnesota is free. So right off the bat, they make it really easy for you. And then we have a lot of other state institutions who will have free apps all year long. Different community colleges, some will have them different months, but October, if application fees are a concern for you and you are applying to Minnesota State schools, most Minnesota State schools are free in October. Not the University of Minnesota, not UMD. We are a complicated state. If you take Wisconsin next door, they have the UW system, and all of their public schools fall under that umbrella. In Minnesota, we have the Minnesota State system with schools like Mankato, Winona, Bemidji, Southwest, and all the two-year schools. That's under one umbrella. And then we have the U of M system with Twin Cities, Duluth, Crookston, Rochester, and Morris. So two different systems. So we have it just a little bit more complicated, but there are free apps out there. So you can Google, and the UW system all UW system apps are free except for Madison, La Crosse, and Eau Claire. And they will never be, there's no like month in the year that they're free. It's just if you need an application waiver. And then I have some free apps in South Dakota. So I already talked about the Share My App program. Okay, so once you select the app you plan to use, you'll create an account with that email that you'll check regularly, and then you can also use this college planning workbook, which you can click on, which is basically a Google sheet that helps you track all the information. So just another tool. What are the main application components? Number one, transcript, except for the University of Minnesota and some other schools. Is anybody wondering why does the U do that? Should be. So the U actually determines your acceptance based on your core GPA. So they strip out electives that they don't care about, and they calculate their own GPA for you. So they're calculating it based on your social studies, English, science, and math courses predominantly. And if they have you enter each class separately, they can just use their formula and strip out the GPA that they want to calculate. And that's true for other schools that have you enter by hand. That's what they're kind of doing. Activities are an important component. If you're using the Common App or any app for that point, you want to be strategic. So let's say that you were a tennis player all 4 years and you love tennis. But let's say that you also started some sort of service project on your own. Which one should take the first place ranking? That entirely depends on the one where you had more leadership opportunity. So don't think of it as ranking it based on the time you give something. Think of it as what has helped you evolve into who you are, most importantly. And you want to be very strategic in how you rank those activities. I think on the Common App you have space for 12. Is that no, Lily? How many? 10. Okay. Same with achievements. You want to think about them as an importance to you and how you have grown and changed and developed. We'll get into, so test scores, those aren't bolded, essay and letter of recommendation because it depends on the school. So, how many of you have your Parchment account all set up? Because you did it during Ranger Connect when you were supposed to last year. Maybe? Okay. So, not right now, we'll come back to this. But in the slides, I have linked right here to the page you will visit to check if you have your Parchment account. Before the end of the day, if you do nothing else, make sure that you have your Parchment account set up because it is how transcripts will go from the school to the colleges to which you are applying. Now this gets confusing for you all because you will work with admission reps who will say, take this form and bring it to your counselor and they'll get your transcript. Okay, I'm going to repeat that again because this is really important. You will have admission reps who will say, take this form to your counselor, that's your dean, and have them fill it out and they'll get you your transcript. That is not how we do things here at all. Don't bring the form to your dean, don't bring it to me. You have to request your transcripts through Parchment. So Parchment is a third-party provider that we pay to manage transcripts. The transcripts go directly from Parchment to the school. That's what makes a transcript official. If it never passes through you, that's an official transcript, when it goes directly from the institution to another institution. In Parchment, you can request to have one emailed to you. So I gave you a hard copy, but you're going to want to make sure you also are periodically emailing yourself a transcript because there are other things that you can use an unofficial transcript for. There are lots of scholarships which accept unofficial transcripts. So you should always make sure you know how to have access to your transcript. So Parchment is pretty easy to set up. There are a whole series of questions and profile information that you will be prompted to answer. You don't have to do that to request your transcript. One thing that people get stuck on is it will ask you to waive your FERPA rights. That you want to say, yes, I accept waiving my rights, because that's what allows Parchment to send the transcript directly from them to the institution. So it's basically your way of saying, yes, it's okay that I don't see or touch my transcript. So you want to waive your rights, and then you have to sign there. Eric.
Should we use like our personal email for that, or just our school email?
If you haven't started it yet, at this point, I would use your personal email. Yep, because this kind of goes all into that college bank. Parchment, you'll have access to forever. You will go back to Parchment if you are applying to grad school and they want your high school transcript. You'll go into Parchment. The difference will be you'll pay. Transcripts are free until the end of June for you. So after you graduate, you always have to send a final transcript to the school you ultimately want to go to. And then at the end of June, at that point, you're cut off from free transcripts, unfortunately, and then you start being charged, I think it's like $12 a transcript. So, there's a link in here too if you get stuck in Parchment, Guide to High School Transcripts. I'm happy to help you too, and we'll have time for that as well. I've already talked about the U a lot in their self-report. So, interpreting your transcript. This is a little tricky because up until this year, we've had this funky schedule where we have semester and quarter classes. My advice to you is to treat every single class on your transcript like a semester class, because our quarter classes are ultimately the same credit as our semester classes. So, semester class equals quarter class, and they're all a half a credit. Does that make sense? That's the easiest way to interpret it. A couple other little tricks when interpreting your transcript. PSEO students, you are still high school students. You do not enter that you're a college student. You're still a high school student, but those classes are dual enrollment. CIS and other concurrent enrollment classes are also dual enrollment classes. If you're stuck about how many credits I actually have of English, you can look at your high school graduation requirements and see, okay, I needed 4 credits of language arts. This is important for like the Minnesota State app and I think the UW system app. And if you have any questions about any of that, I'm happy to help. It gets a little bit confusing because it'll say things like how many credits of beginning algebra you had. So Algebra 1 or 9th grade algebra, you accomplished 1 credit. But then intermediate algebra is algebra 2, typically taken as a junior, also 1 credit. So sometimes it's just hard to translate our system to what they're asking for. Don't hesitate to ask. Super easy for me to help you with that. This is just for you to go back to help you understand how our graduation requirements translate to, this is from the Minnesota State application, so you know what are, and then, but like, let's look at, you can't barely read it, but it says geography 0.5. However, if you took AP Human Geography, you would have 1.0 because that was a full year class. This is not a time to be humble when you are explaining everything you have been involved in. And it's also important for you to really consider those things that you maybe don't feel are valued by colleges. All the time I have students who maybe aren't involved in activities or sports because they have so many responsibilities at home or they need to work. That is very important information for colleges to know, and they appreciate that information and they consider it wholly. So definitely add that type of information. Community engagement, other organizations, church, whatever, add everything that you've been involved in. And they're particularly, like I said, interested in those areas where you've had leadership roles. So we've already talked about how to rank that a bit more. Any questions about activities or engagement or anything? For those of you who are planning to pursue like an engineering track, and you're maybe a tinkerer and you spend a lot of time in the garage building things, taking things apart, That's also really important for them to know. They also appreciate and want to know that, because that is very like real world applied. You have the same attributes and characteristics that they're looking for. Make sure you include academic honors if you don't know if you have any. Those are the academic letter points, NHS. You can click on those links. Maybe you don't know that you're an AP Scholar. There's a whole chart there that tells you what makes the different rankings of AP Scholar based on the number of tests you've taken and the scores you've received. Okay, test scores. Raise your hand if you've taken an ACT. Raise your hand if you've taken an SAT. Raise your hand if you've taken both. Okay, so raise your hand if you are happy with the score you have right now. It's okay, don't think I'm honest. Okay, great. So this is the deal. The answer to test scores is a constantly evolving scene for us. So for those of you who are interested in the most selective institutions, we are watching them one by one return to required test scores. So that means that if you are applying to a school that doesn't have it required, you may just want to consider what that means, because they are seemingly returning one by one. If anyone in here, I don't think there were very many, if anyone's interested in a California school, they're test blind. They will not accept a test score in California. They do not care what your test score is in California. You want to determine whether or not you submit a test score if you can answer the question, will it enhance my application, with a resounding yes. Well, how do you know if it enhances your application? You have to do a little research. You have to search middle 50% ACT score Carleton, or you name the school, St. Thomas, whatever. If you fall in that middle 50%, then I would recommend go ahead, or higher, or the top 25%, I would recommend submitting it. There are certain colleges at the University of Minnesota that might have like 30 to 34 range. Well, if you got a 28, that's fantastic, and I don't want you to think any differently, but it still means you wouldn't submit your score in that situation. So even though it's fantastic, it doesn't enhance your application. You want it to be the icing on the cake. If you are on the bubble of whether or not I should take another test, definitely, and SATs are like, the next open SAT isn't until March 8th, so that's moot for you guys. ACT is definitely more open, but you can certainly take it to enhance scholarship dollars. Some of you will notice if you research a certain school and look up scholarship, it will literally have a chart that will tell you how much you will be given based on your score. I had a student one year who took every single ACT test offered during her senior year, and she did it because every single time she went up a point, and the school she was going to gave her an extra $1,000 every point she went up. So for her, that was a really easy way to make $1,000. Sit down and take the 3-hour test. 3.5. So definitely think about what's right for you. If you are stuck on this question of whether or not you should submit a score, ask me. I can help you research and figure out. But you want to be very diligent. On some applications, if you say, yes, I'm going to submit a score, you have to submit a score. You can't change your mind. So just keep that in mind. Okay, for those of you who are planning to still take another ACT, Mrs. Holmquist is running a series of classes. I will have some flyers. I meant to bring them out. I'll have some flyers here that you can grab, but she's doing a STEM prep class and an English and reading section prep class. So these are like quick ways to get yourself maybe hopefully some extra points. Okay, essays. I probably have this out of order because I want to talk, let me see where I want to talk really quickly about bubble students. So about 20% of you at a glance are what I would indicate a bubble student. So a bubble student is somebody who wants to go to a certain school but doesn't meet their middle 50% or their automatic acceptance. So Mankato is a super easy example. They have an automatic acceptance with a 3.0 GPA or a 22 ACT. If you're not submitting an ACT and you have a 2.9, you are a bubble student. So Mankato does not ask for a letter of recommendation or an essay, but as a bubble student, you can always submit more information than they ask for, and they will add it to your application and they will review it. Now, if you're applying to Yale and you decide to submit 12 letters of recommendation, they will become annoyed with you. But if they require 3 letters of recommendation and you just really feel like that 4th letter has something more that needs to be said about you, you can submit it and ask for it to be added to your file. You can always ask for additional information to be added to your file. So everyone has a story. Even though schools like Mankato don't require an essay, this is your opportunity to explain to the school why you should be accepted. And there's so many factors. You guys have complex lives, things happen. There are reasons that maybe your grades don't or your transcript doesn't illustrate exactly who you are. Explain that in an essay. You can have a teacher write a letter of recommendation saying, you know, I saw this student struggle in this area, but she really conquered what was happening and worked so hard and demonstrated that she is capable. Those are very powerful things that can be said about you that can help in acceptance. Every year, like last year I had a student, I walked her through the bubble student protocol, I call it, all the essay, the letter of recommendation. The school she wanted to go to was Mankato. They actually wrote on her letter of acceptance that additional information is what made the difference, and they really appreciated having it. So don't think that you're like putting them out or causing them extra work. This is your chance to make the case for yourself on why you would be a good fit for their institution. So I just wanted to talk a bit about that because some of you might be thinking, oh, I don't need to do an essay, I don't need to do a letter of recommendation. But if you're a bubble student, then you do, even if your school doesn't require it. So we're gonna go back to essays here quickly. So the U has a couple of optional short answer. My advice is anytime something is optional, do it. Still do it. I mean, if you have literally nothing to say, then you can leave it blank. There's like a diversity experience question on the U's application. I think everyone should have something to say, but if you don't make something up, because what the most important thing with applications right now is to be authentic, particularly in the environment of AI. So I've read probably 50 articles this summer on how colleges are dealing with AI, and they all say the same thing. Your voice, your authenticity is so important. And they can tell because they're reading thousands and thousands of essays and they just get a feel for what is not personable or seems to be AI generated. And that is a really bad look. Don't use AI. You can use AI for so many things during this college search process. AI is a brilliant tool if you are trying to figure out other colleges to add to your list. Maybe you're somebody who wants to major in psych, but you want to be at a larger school, but you want to be outstate, and you want the school to have a really strong behavioral science lab, and oh, by the way, they should have synchro swimming. That is something AI is like it's a really interesting way to use AI right now in the college search when you have like a very nuanced search. But to prompt into AI your essay prompt, don't do it. You could prompt everything about you and get some ideas. You can certainly get some ideas, but you need to really heavily make sure you have your own mark on that essay. It is not, I mean, you should do your best to have the right grammar, but don't write to impress. I've had all the Ivy League schools tell me they are very turned off when a student writes like a very academic essay, when they like write like they're trying to really impress a professor or something. They don't want it. They want you authentically, and they get that you're high schoolers. They know that you're 17 and 18-year-olds. So if you write like a PhD 46-year-old candidate, they see through that. Little things that you maybe think aren't important, it doesn't have to be like a big topic. It doesn't have to be a big thing that happened to you. It's how you responded to the thing that happened. One essay that I was in an Ivy League webinar, and one essay example that they gave me that really stuck with me was about a cross-country runner, and she started off with wit. They love wit. If you have any humor or wit that you can use, that makes you human and brings you to life off of the paper. So she started with a little witticism about how you were never going to find her at the front of the pack. She was the one asking for directions because she was always the last one. But then she went into how she was like the team mom, the team cheerleader. She was the one hosting dinners and doing all these things for her team and just really demonstrating a lot of character through her essay. And so that you might think that's just like such a simple thing. It doesn't have to be, oh, I'm, doing all of this research in my spare time and I discovered, how to split the atom or something. So, it can be a very benign example. It's how you demonstrate your character through that example that matters. So definitely think about that. And then bring in those details that are unique to you. What is unique to you? I don't say this to scare anybody off. I just always am collecting information and then I share it. You can interpret the way you want it. But I was talking to some Carleton admission reps once, and I was really stunned that they were like, man, if I read one more essay about hockey or the Boundary Waters, I'm telling you. I mean, it was clear, like they automatically had such a, just their own bias just because they'd read so many essays on those topics. So if they're reading an essay about the Boundary Waters or hockey, that's fine, but you better make it your own. It has to be unique. There has to be some things that you're really showing and highlighting through your story. So just keep that in mind. You can go back to the rest of this. One other common mistake that happens is students really have something they want to say that's really important to them, but they pick the wrong question. You have to answer the question. It seems so obvious, but all the time I will have students ask me, can you read this essay? And I'll say, well, I need to see the prompt. So if you share an essay with me, I always put the prompt at the top, and then it happens quite frequently that students don't actually answer the question because they have something they want to say, and that's just like so forefront of mind. You either have to pick a different question or start from scratch. You have to answer the question that you've chosen. So keep that in mind. The rest of this you can look through at your own time, but have other people read it too, I would say. Have multiple people read it. It's helpful in fine-tuning that essay. Letters of recommendation. More important maybe than ever before. Colleges are complaining about grade inflation constantly. We're in a mostly test-optional environment, so that complicates their job for them. So they are loving letters of recommendation. These are so important as a bubble student, or particularly if you are applying to a very selective institution. Another story that I heard in a webinar I was in, it was Stanford had let in a student, and the counselor was like, I actually didn't think the student was Stanford material. How did they get accepted? And Stanford admission rep said, we received a letter from the counselor, from the student's counselor, who had witnessed a scene in the cafeteria. A new student had come in, the student sat down alone. The student applying to Stanford had a lot of social capital. This student was very different from most of the peers in the school. The student stood up, walked over, sat down at the table, talked to the new student a little bit, then stood up and waved all of his friends over, and that's why Stanford said they accepted. Now, of course, the student probably also had 4.0 plus and a 35 ACT, but the point is that they're looking for character in a lot of different ways, and one of the ways that they can see character is through your letters of recommendation. So you want to feed your recommenders as much information as you can. If you had a situation where you're asking Mrs. Marshall for a letter of recommendation, and you remember an exchange you had, or you remember a situation with another student, she might not remember it, but if you felt really proud of something, or you felt like it really demonstrated a certain character, you can remind her of that in your resume that you give her. Every letter of recommendation you ask for, you have to give your Zello resume or a different resume, and you have to give the recommender 2 weeks notice. If you are applying to a highly selective school, you have to complete the student profile, which most of you have. If you don't have that and are applying to a highly selective school, then you can ask me for it. But you want to provide them as much information as possible. It's not cheating, it's just the best way to get the strongest letter from the teacher or dean, because they see a lot of students, and so they might not remember that exchange, but then they are reminded and they're like, oh yeah, that really did demonstrate some great character in the student. If you are using the Common App, you will assign your recommenders by school. You have to assign them by school. Your counselor is always your dean. You have to let your dean know if you are asking for a recommendation, and also give them your resume. And give them 2 weeks notice, but also, let them know. See them in person, send an email, ask in person, follow up with an email. If you are using other applications in Zello, there's a place to request your letter of recommendation. So that is how your teacher will be officially, or your counselor will be officially asked for other schools. Any questions about letters of recommendation? Okay, I want to get you guys to your break. I've already gone through this, talked about this. These are the exact steps for asking for your letter of recommendation in Zello, so you can refer back to that when you need. If we have time at the end, I'm going to get into financial aid a little bit more, but I want to get you to your break right now. So we'll do financial aid and scholarships towards the end if we have time. So this is your help team again today. Get up, stretch, and we'll start digging into our apps. I'm here if you have any questions in the meantime. If you didn't pick up your transcript, pick it up here. And Chromebooks are over there if you need one.
I saw that. The entire
I wanted to go to that one. I would throw my windows out and be like, maggots and serpents or one. You just like smiles a lot.
I think he's so good.
If you would like an ACT class sheet, come and grab one. They're up there.
You want one? No, I don't.
Okay, everybody. I'm going to gather your attention again. We're going to introduce our help team in just a second, but I do want to make a quick note about your transcripts. I think most of you probably heard that the classes that are on your transcript for your senior year are not for sure. They're like, 90+% there with your schedules. They're not open yet, so that's a glimpse. The other thing I really want to draw your attention to is what you chose to take your senior year matters. I am being told all the time by colleges that even though they will not see your grades for those classes, they are very interested in the rigor that you are going through your senior year, what you are choosing for yourself, and also how it aligns with your career goals. So this is not the time to just have, like a skate by schedule. That's not what we're aiming for at all. We want to finish strong and finish with some rigor and courses that align with your interests. So with that, we're going to get started with some introductions. If you don't mind just all introducing yourselves and where you're from, if you want to.
Hey everyone, my name's Michaela. I'm from the University of Wisconsin, River Falls.
Hi everybody, my name is Matt. I'm with NDSU.
And my name is Mitchell. I'm with the University of Minnesota Twin Cities.
I'm Miss Brett. I'm a UNA student here, but I also went to